Welcome back to our news bulletin. In Spain, the daily death toll from novel coronavirus has fallen to 523, taking the tally to over 18,500. Elsewhere, Iran has reported 94 new deaths, increasing the total to 4,777, while the United States has recorded more than 26,000 fatalities. In Pakistan, there are 6,000 coronavirus cases with 107 deaths and over 1,400 recoveries. Across the world, almost 2 million people have been infected, with nearly 127,000 deaths and nearly 500,000 recoveries. More in this report.
The new coronavirus continues killing thousands every day, overwhelming healthcare systems and paralyzing the global economy. The US, with the world's third largest population, has now over 600,000 infection cases, 3 times more than any other country. The country is also set to end its lockdowns and opens its battered economy before May 1st.
The plans to reopen the country are close to being finalized, and we will soon be sharing details and new guidelines with everybody. I will be speaking to all 50 governors very shortly.
Meanwhile, in Europe, the UK and France have extended their lockdowns, while Austria, Spain, Italy, and Denmark have eased restrictions, still requiring social distancing. France has become the 4th country to pass 15,000 death toll mark after Italy, Spain, and the US. But like Germany, France too is getting a grip on the pandemic spread.
Depuis le 1er mars.
The COVID-19 pandemic is therefore still active. We have for the last few days been seeing a plateau, a slowing of the number of hospital admissions, and even a slight decrease in the number of patients in intensive care thanks to you. Thanks to your efforts, thanks to confinement, we have limited the spread of the virus.
En lien avec les...
Meanwhile, China has reported a decline in new confirmed cases in the mainland, but there is an increasing number of local transmissions in its far northeast bordering Russia.
Now, the US President Donald Trump is under fire after cutting off funding for the WHO, accusing it of covering up the spread of the coronavirus. In response, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said it is not the time to cut funds. The African Union said Trump's decision is deeply regrettable, while Bill Gates said the announcement is as dangerous as it sounds. The WHO has repeatedly rejected Trump's criticism over the body's response to the pandemic. Earlier, talking to the media at the White House, Trump claimed the outbreak could have been contained at its source. He said the WHO has failed in its basic duty and it must be held accountable. Global drug companies and scientists have enhanced research for COVID-19 vaccinations. China's scientists have started second phase of clinical trial for the coronavirus vaccine in the hardest hit city of Wuhan in Hubei province. The vaccine is constructed by genetic engineering methods and is used to prevent diseases caused by coronavirus infections. Developers say they are focusing on the elderly people as the fatal virus hits them the most. The UK's pharmaceutical giants GlaxoSmithKline have announced to collaborate with France's Sanofi to develop a vaccine. GSK said the world will need more than one COVID-19 vaccine to cater the requirements of global community. Meanwhile, German officials said they have to work closely with World Health Organization in order to invent a vaccine. The new coronavirus death toll in Pakistan has surged to 107 as 11 people died in the last 24 hours across the country. The health ministry said 272 new confirmed cases were reported since yesterday, bringing the total to nearly 6,000. The health ministry said 1,446 patients of coronavirus have recovered so far. It said over 73,000 tests have been conducted countrywide, while nearly 3,300 people tested during the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Pakistan International Airlines said it is set to start second phase to bring back stranded citizens across the world. The airline said Pakistanis will be repatriated from Canada, South Korea, Indonesia, and the UK from April 15th to the 20th. The Pakistan Army has rejected India's baseless insinuations about smuggling COVID-19 patients into Kashmir and violating the LOC ceasefire. In a series of tweets, the military's media wing said New Delhi is attempting to divert the world's attention from the failure of its 5th August move in occupied Kashmir. It said Pakistan has always given UN military observers unhindered access to the line of control. It added, India should focus on addressing the internal chaos created from mishandling of the COVID-19 crisis and brutalities in occupied Kashmir. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Foreign Office summoned an Indian diplomat to protest ceasefire violations along the LOC that wounded a civilian. In India, uncertainty, fear, and exhaustion are at their peak after the government announced to extend COVID-19 curfew till May 3rd. The migrant workers are facing biggest difficulties without home, job, and shortage of food and shelter. After Mumbai, thousands of migrant workers gathered in Gujarat state demanding they should be sent to their homes. The migrant workers gathered in Varacha area of Surat city and sat on a road demanding transport from the government. Meanwhile, hundreds of workers are living in temporary shelters in Uttar Pradesh with no job and money. Talking to media, the workers said they were fired from their jobs on March 22nd, right after Janta curfew across the country. India has recorded 392 deaths and over 11,400 total coronavirus infections across the country. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington has achieved its primary mission in Afghanistan by defeating al-Qaeda. In an interview, the secretary said currently there are only a few hundred al-Qaeda fighters left in Afghanistan. Pompeo said the Taliban have been told to break with those who targeted New York City. The Secretary of State said he thinks Washington and its forces have achieved this goal of counterterrorism. He said, when the U.S. is done with what it needs, it will get its team back home. The Secretary said its forces can protect the U.S. without having tens and tens of thousands of soldiers stationed abroad. The Pentagon has extended restrictions on the U.S. military's travel and movement abroad due to the novel coronavirus pandemic. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said it is unclear how long coronavirus-related restrictions would remain on military personnel. Esper said the military will review the issue every 15 days, with the current order set to expire on 11th May. He said the military is considering to relocate its doctors and nurses to overstretched hospitals in New York. The defense chief said out of 585 positive tested personnel abroad, the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt, only 213 are symptomatic. Pentagon remains concerned about asymptomatic cases among about 2,600 U.S. troops that have tested positive so far. The U.S. says North Korea's recent test launches of short-range missiles were not particularly provocative or threatening. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley said the U.S. did not consider the episode as any deliberate provocation. Milley said the launches may be tied to some celebrations taking place inside North Korea. He added the early intelligence assessment was mixed. Earlier on Tuesday, North Korea launched multiple short-range anti-ship cruise missiles into the Japan Sea. South Korean military said Sukhoi jets also fired air-to-surface missiles as part of North's ongoing military exercises. In South Korea, exit polls suggest President Moon Jae-in's ruling party is projected to win the general elections held during the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. The Election Commission said over 62% of voters turned out to cast their ballot to elect a 300-member unicameral parliament. Moon's progressive camp is on track to secure up to 177 seats. Over 11 million people have already cast their ballots during last week's two-day early voting, including those who voted via post. Over 13,000 people in self-quarantine are also allowed to cast their ballots after regular voting ends. In another news, Libya's UN-recognized government says its troops conducted airstrikes against Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces fleeing Al-Watia airbase. The raids come after Haftar's forces killed 8 government soldiers in drone strikes in the western mountain city of Jatu. A government's military spokesman said the army have laid a siege to the airbase to prevent reinforcements from reaching Haftar's remaining forces inside. He said the government forces have also extended their control to over 3,000 square kilometers in the cities west of Tripoli. He said the troops took control of Egyptian and UAE's arms arsenal containing large quantities of ammunition and military equipment for the LNA. Tensions in the North African country are high since the government accelerated their strikes and recaptured 6 coastal cities. Egypt says its security forces have killed 7 militants during a raid in the Al Amiria neighborhood in Cairo. The Interior Ministry said a policeman was killed during the clashes, while 3 other officers were wounded. The ministry said security forces carried out the raid on the armed terrorist cell over an intelligence provided by the security agency. It said weapons and ammunition were found with the suspects. The ministry said the militants were planning attacks on Coptic churches ahead of their Easter celebrations next Sunday. Turkey says it has killed 2 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the southeastern town of SIRNAK. The Defense Ministry says the fighters were killed during an air-backed operation. It said the militants were detected by the Provincial Military Command. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapon caches and shelters used by the terrorists. It said the forces will not stop the operations against militants in or outside Turkish borders. Ankara holds the fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. Iraq says its forces have killed 8 ISIS militants in clashes in the northern Kirkuk province. The paramilitary Hashad Shabi forces said they carried out an operation with the military in the Kirkuk area. In a statement, the forces said the operation was backed by Iraqi helicopter gunships. The statement did not give details about the casualties among the Iraqi forces. The raid comes a day after the Iraqi troops killed 23 ISIS fighters. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. The Arab League has warned against an Israeli plot to annex more occupied Palestinian territories amid global focus on COVID-19. In a statement, the League's Secretary General Ahmad Abul-Ghaid raised concerns about the grave consequences of the pandemic on the Palestinian cause. Abul-Ghaid expressed concerns over the livelihood of residents in the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip, as well as the refugee camps. He warned that Israeli steps will devastate the Palestinian economy in severe crisis. Abul-Ghaid said Tel Aviv wants to annex occupied Palestinian lands such as the Jordan Valley and the northern West Bank. The Secretary General said the annexations will represent a dangerous ignition of the situation with unpredictable consequences. Earlier, the Palestinian Liberation Organization also warned about Israel's plan of annexing lands amid the pandemic. Governors of the Brazilian states of Rio and Pará have tested positive for COVID-19 as the deadly virus continues to spread across the country. Rio Governor Wilson Witzel and Pará Governor Helder Barbalho made the announcements via social media posts. In Sao Paulo, Brazil's military unit was deployed to disinfect public spaces as the country's confirmed cases topped 25,000 with over 1,500 deaths. Meanwhile, Peru's government said the country will return to normal levels of productive activity in 2021. In Brazil, Health Minister Henrique Mandetta took a swipe at President Jair Bolsonaro while urging a unified response against the outbreak. Bolsonaro has repeatedly downplayed the pandemic while criticizing state governors for imposing lockdowns. Brazilian citizens said they backed the Health Minister Mandetta over the president.
Without a doubt, I support the health minister over President Bolsonaro. I don't know what's going on in their heads. Their situation is very ugly for our country, and to see there is no unity in government. They are not on the same page. It is clear that people need to be aware of the situation, to come together at this difficult time and to listen to the health ministry undoubtedly. He understands a lot more about health than our president.
COVID-19 has hit East Africa, which is already struggling to contain a desert locust invasion that puts millions at risk of starvation. The Food and Agriculture Organization has warned restrictions on movement to contain the virus have compromised the fight against locust. More in this report.
20 million people are facing food insecurity in 6 East African countries, already combating locust infestation. The regions include Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, Uganda, and Tanzania. Together, these countries also have over 470 confirmed cases of novel coronavirus. The figure likely doesn't present the full picture, considering limited access to testing kits in the region. Regardless, measures to slow the spread of the virus have put the food supply in these countries at risk.
When you want to load an aeroplane early in the morning, there is also the restrictions of timing and also locating the swamps because of the curfew. However, we are trying to come up with innovative ways, like reducing the number of populations that are being met at once for the training.
The FAO is training farmers to use motorized pesticide sprayers to fight the locust invasion. So far, the initiative has seen 240,000 hectares of land with chemical or biopesticides. But the pandemic has disrupted the supply of both the sprayers and pesticides.
The small-scale farmers, it's a very big problem, and for the food security of Kenya, especially after a problem like the coronavirus, how are we going to feed Kenya? All of our produce is for local consumption, and yeah, I think everyone needs to take this seriously and support everywhere you can, because it's a very big problem for Kenya as a whole.
The desert locust is considered the most dangerous migratory pest in the world. A swarm of 1 square kilometer can contain up to 80 million locusts, which can eat the same amount of food as 35,000 people.
The Cannes Film Festival will not take place this year in France in its original form due to the coronavirus pandemic, but the organizers say they continue to review options for the event. The film festival, one of the largest in the world, was initially due to take place from May 12th to 23rd. However, on Monday, France extended the lockdown until May 11th, which means public events including festivals cannot be held. The organizers said they have acknowledged that postponement of the 73rd International Festival is not an option. The statement added, it is difficult to assume that the Festival des Cannes could be held this year in its original form. Let's look at the global oil markets as oil prices have hit the lowest level since 2002 as US WTI crude plunged to a fraction over $19 per barrel despite the historic OPEC Plus output cut deal. Oil prices have declined as much as 64% this year as worldwide lockdowns mandated by the COVID-19 pandemic slump global demand. Meanwhile, the International Energy Agency said the global oil demand will fall by a record amount this year. IEA said lockdown measures imposed to curb the coronavirus outbreak have brought the global economy to a virtual halt. It said global oil demand will fall by over 9 million barrels per day in 2020. The energy body also said April alone will witness a fall in demand of 29 million barrels per day from a year earlier to levels last seen in 1995. Warning the situation is even more dire than it was during the Great Depression, the IEA added the fall in demand will erase almost a decade of growth. The IMF has warned Australian economy will suffer its largest hit since the Great Depression in the wake of COVID-19 crisis. The fund predicted the country's GDP will contract by nearly 7% to suffer losses over $80 billion this year. The global lender said Australia's economy is expected to sustain a bigger blow than that of countries hit harder by the pandemic. Meanwhile, the UK's Office for Budget Responsibility forecasted country's GDP could fall 35% in the second quarter of 2020. The OBR forecasts British unemployment can rise by over 2 million to 10% in the second quarter. The UK's Finance Minister Rishi Sunak also warned of tough times ahead.
These are tough times, and there will be more to come. As I've said before, we can't protect every business and every household. But we came into this crisis with a fundamentally sound economy, powered by the hard work and ingenuity of the British people.
Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.